I'm Dr. Jeremy London. I am a board-certified cardiovascular surgeon, and I've been in clinical practice for the last 25 years. And today's podcast is literally something that applies to each and every one of us. Doesn't matter if you're a physician, a patient, a teacher, a parent, a child, or even myself. And this is the mysterious and often maddening gap between what we know and what we do. And we've all been here. We're all familiar with this. We know we shouldn't smoke, but many people do smoke. We know that whole foods are better, but we reach for the chips. Now, frequently we are drawn to the shiny new trend, but many times we just need to focus on the simple things. Let's get the easy stuff right. Now, what do I mean by that? If I were to ask you, what is the one thing that you could do today to make your life better? I bet that you could come up with it immediately. But like many of us, even though we know better, many times we avoid the more difficult road and we don't actually do better. So what we're going to explore today in this podcast is, number one, why do we do this? Why does the disconnect exist? And most importantly, what do we do about it? How do we build the bridge across this gap? This is really not a new concept. Let's take a little step back in history to 1957. And a psychologist named Leon Festinger created this theory of cognitive dissonance. And basically, what this states is that when our behaviors are not in line with our values, we are at conflict with ourselves. For instance, the smoker that knows they shouldn't smoke, but they do it anyway. Or again, someone who says that they are financially sound, but they clearly spend unwisely. Or someone that is a health nut and focuses on nutrition, but still reaches for the unhealthy snacks, creates a disconnect between the behaviors and your beliefs. Now, Festinger felt that there were three ways that we dealt with this disconnect. In other words, a way of kind of shoring up this emotional equation, if you will. And the first, of course, is to change your beliefs and change your behavior. So if you know you shouldn't smoke and you smoke, you quit smoking. Or you change your beliefs where you say, I'm going to continue to smoke, but my grandfather, he lived till 90 and he smoked his entire life. Or you justify the conflict in some way by saying, well, I only smoke when I'm stressed. A more modern twist on Festinger's theory is one, a self-affirmation theory, where you know you're not actually doing your best, but you tend to refocus on areas of your life where you are. In other words, you may not be eating healthy, but you convince yourself that you're a really hard worker and you're committed to your job. The second is an identity-based motivation. And this has to do with if you consider yourself a healthy person and you adopt those behaviors, then your behavior is in line with your chosen or self-imposed identity. But if your identity is not clear, if you're not clear about who you are, who you want to be, it can be much more difficult then to align your behaviors because those contours are not clear. And that's where the dissonance actually occurs. In summary, we have to act in accordance with the identity we hold to be true of ourselves. And if those lines are not clear, then dissonance can occur. We want to take a minute and thank our sponsor of this podcast, LMNT. Hydration isn't just about drinking more water. It's about replacing what you lose. When you sweat from workouts, sauna sessions, or just daily life activities, you're not just losing water, you're losing electrolytes like sodium, potassium, and magnesium. That's why I choose LMNT as my electrolyte replacement of choice. LMNT has everything you need and nothing you don't. Their electrolyte formula uses a science-backed electrolyte ratio of sodium, potassium, and magnesium. Electrolytes are used by every cell in your body, and even minimal dehydration can limit cognitive and physical performance. LMNT tastes great and helps me replenish my electrolytes after a hard workout or sauna. I mix 1 packet of LMNT, usually my favorite flavor, grapefruit salt, in 32 ounces of water to ensure I stay hydrated throughout the day. If you want to try LMNT for yourself, head to drinklmnt.com/London and you will receive a free sample pack of all 8 of their most popular flavors with any purchase. That's drinklmnt.com/London. Plus, they offer an unlimited time, no questions asked refund policy. So if you buy it, try it, and don't like it for any reason, they will refund you. Now let's get back to the podcast. So let's look at some real world examples of this knowing doing gap. I think the easiest one really is smoking, because there's been warning labels on cigarette boxes for years, but people still smoke. And the excuses continue. I'll quit next year. It helps with stress. Or I've been smoking for this long. I'm too damaged. Why would I quit now? The same goes for diets and nutrition. You know, we all know, most of us know, that a whole foods diet is the best route, the healthiest route. But fast foods, sugary foods, and comfort foods are easy, they're accessible, and many times they're the choice that we make, irrespective of knowing better. So why does this happen, particularly with things like food? Well, emotional regulation, habits, time constraints, marketing influences, all of these things come into play. Even with things like finances. Most people understand that saving money and being responsible with your finances is the right thing to do. But when that shiny new phone shows up, you go and you put it on the credit card because you want the new phone. And, you know, many times we just say, well, I've been working hard, so I deserve it. We somehow try to balance this equation. So what unites all of these different areas of our lives? Well, I think this dissonance is not just a rational gap that we can talk about here. It's a deeply emotional gap that's often tied to stress, fatigue, and fear sometimes. You know, for myself, I find that I know that recovery is really important in my life. I work hard. I like to work out hard, but I find it very difficult to take time off, to add rest time, even though I know better. I know that true growth occurs during recovery. Growth doesn't occur when you're in the gym lifting weights. It occurs during that rest time. If you're learning something, deep memory occurs when you sleep. That's when you really embed those memories into your brain. But the fear of missing out on that next workout because I'm going to be too busy, or the fear of not getting up early or being too fatigued the next time to follow through with something, I convince myself that I don't need the recovery and that I need to do that additional workout, that's where the win is. And so I think we've all fallen prey to this at some point in our lives. And it's a matter of taking a step back and examining with a level of intellectual honesty how we make these choices for ourselves. So why do we all fall into this trap? Why does this happen even with really smart people, really intelligent individuals? We all fall prey to this at some point. Well, here are some potential reasons. The first is short-term reward versus long-term goals. Our brains are wired for immediate pleasures and avoiding any kind of discomfort. Things like heart health and retirement earnings are so far in the future, but that donut, it's right there, right now. Ego and identity. Well, admitting that our actions aren't in line with our identity hurts our ego, so we tend to try to rationalize that away. Mental fatigue. It's much easier to plan a healthy meal at 9 in the morning than it is at 6 p.m. after you've been working all day long, and takeout is just super convenient. And then external influences. We tend to be really shaped by our external environments. So, for instance, when you're in college and binge drinking is all the rage, well, everybody's doing it, so it seems like it must be the good thing to do. And it somehow is easier to silence this internal dissonance when you are in some way abdicated by the group of people that you're hanging out with. So there's a lot of forces at play here, but again, it's both rational dissonance as well as emotional forces at play. So what are the tactics to deal with this inevitable trap that we're all going to fall into? Well, the first is to build awareness without judgment. In other words, to have some real intellectual honesty about who you are and where you are. Now, how do you do that? Well, simply name the dissonance. In other words, you say to yourself, I value health, but I haven't exercised in a year. Don't look at this as self-criticism. Look at it as self-care. Create that space for yourself. And understand that by doing this, you then can define where you are, who you are. Don't focus on what your actions of the last year or previous history have been, but from this point forward, because your past does not define you. And as important, if not more importantly, decide on the person that you want to be. That enables you to create a path for the journey. And this is, in fact, where this gap lies. From defining who you are and potentially actions that are not in line with your beliefs, to clearly defining who you want to be in the future. And at this point, you can start to build the bridge to then cover and travel this gap to get to where you want to be. Now, how does this start? Well, small, with micro habits, if you will. And they can be really small things like 1 minute of meditation, walking for 5 minutes a day, saving $5 a month to get into a new routine. We'll get back to the podcast in a minute. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Function Health. Taking control of your health starts with understanding your biometrics. I use Function Health to tailor my nutrition and wellness plan. Function offers over 100 plus biomarkers to give you a comprehensive picture of your health at an affordable price. Their advanced testing includes 5 times the standard primary care panel. Testing for biomarkers ranging from heart health, hormone status, kidney function, nutrients, and more. Not only will you see which biomarkers are in and out of range, but Function will also analyze each biomarker and offer insights from top doctors in their specialties. Clinicians will contact you promptly if any urgent results arise. Knowing your data is powerful. Function helps you navigate the information and allows you to design a biomarker-driven plan to maximize your health span and lifespan. If you are interested in getting your 100 plus biomarkers, visit www.functionhealth.com/London and you'll receive a $100 credit on your membership. That's www.functionhealth.com/London. Check it out. Now let's get back to the podcast. So what's the advantage to breaking this down into really small steps? Well, I think that we've all experienced the fear of starting, which is really just the fear of failure many times, that you don't want to head down a road that you're not going to be successful at, particularly if it seems daunting or even near impossible at times. And I love the quote, fear is an ocean wide, but only an inch deep. And you have to take that first step to truly understand that. And by breaking this down into small, incremental, very obtainable goals, you then understand that the fear factor is much, much less. And most of us have a fear of change, but what we should really fear is staying the same. And that's what can paralyze you in trying to build this bridge across this gap. Another tactic is creating an environment that decreases the amount of friction that you have on this journey. And what do I mean by that? Some examples could be fairly simple. Keep healthier food on the counter and put the junk food away. Create an automatic savings withdrawal on your account. Or delete all your food delivery apps so that you cook home meals more often. Make it easy for yourself to succeed. After these small steps start to accumulate, then you look for validation that you're moving in the right direction. And how do you do this? Well, first, you want to make sure that you're moving the needle positively and not negatively. Because whether you're looking at the number on a scale or the amount of weight you can lift or how far you can run, whatever your objective measures of validation may be, in the end, true validation that you're making progress, I think, is a personal response, in that the pain of missing the activity or missing out on the activity is much greater than the fear and the pain of actually doing it. That tells you that you've crossed over to the other side, that you know that if you miss that run, you're going to be really unhappy. So look for those points of validation as motivation as you move forward. As validation becomes more tangible in this process, you get a lot more motivation. And that's what allows you to remain consistent. Consistency compounds. And how do these little micro steps work? Well, 0 compounds to 0. But these small incremental changes and remaining consistent with those compound over time. And at the end of a year, the results can be unbelievable. So inevitably, this whole process is not without bumps in and of itself. So what do you do if you fall off? You fall off course. It happens to all of us. Life is continually undulating, with highs and lows. And how do you respond to that? Well, first, don't catastrophize. You're not a failure. You're human. One misstep doesn't define you. So take a deep breath and relax. Remind yourself, who do I want to be, not what do I want to do necessarily. You can envision yourself, if you will, more as a mindful person making mindful choices to achieve that ultimate goal. And don't focus on the one misstep. Use the mistake as an opportunity. Simple data. Learn from it. Maybe you were tired. Maybe you were distracted. Maybe something tragic happened in your life. No value judgment. Learn from it and move on. And finally, and I have found this to be so true for myself, re-engage quickly. Don't restart on Monday. Start now. Because I have found for myself that the longer I put off restarting, the easier it is to continue to put that off. So re-engage, get back on the horse quickly, and start riding again. So as we started this podcast, this is really something that applies to all of us. It's a universal human struggle. And this knowing-doing gap isn't new. The Stoics spoke of it. Religion continues to remind us to avoid it. Modern psychology continues to study it. It's truly a universal human quality, not a flaw. Because awareness of this gap, awareness of this dissonance is what makes growth truly possible. When we recognize the gap, we have an opportunity to close it. When we acknowledge our missteps along the way, then we're able to regain the agency to correct it and to redirect. And when we embrace our imperfections, that's where we truly open the door to meaningful, lasting change in our life. In conclusion, I'm going to read you what I wrote here so that I give you the full flavor of my thought process. And that is, the next time you catch yourself beginning with the phrase, "I know better," just pause for a second, take a deep breath. Because that's the moment of truth. And don't beat yourself up. Instead, just pause. Because you're not broken, you're simply human. If this episode resonates and resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs a nudge, not towards perfection, but towards awareness, towards self-honesty, and maybe, just maybe, toward doing what they already know is best. If you've made it to this point in the podcast, thank you so much for listening. If you've been watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can leave up to a 5-star review. We would certainly appreciate it, and I hope you guys have a great day.